So this deck was actually like pretty eye-opening about a number of things with the format and the way it's kind of shaped up. Um, First of all, this is a deck that I've routinely misbuilt in the past. I don't really like Ashiok that much for what it's worth. I think that's just a Gerard being Gerard card, honestly. But the the issue I've always had with previous lists of this deck is that they're soft to Abrupt Decay. Um, I've been playing cards like Jace, Valerian, or whatever. Just haven't been that great. Um, and I think that this deck does hits like this really nice spot between like being actually reasonable against Abrupt Decay, but not being the list that we tested for the Pro Tour, which was completely and utterly Abrupt Decay proof at the cost of just not having good cards like Tarmogoyf, which is a pretty big cost in the matchups you want it. I think that honestly, just having a deck that has 4 Tarmogoyfs and no other real targets for Abrupt Decay is fine because like the Decay or Goyf, they trade on cards and on parity, and like you're just like whatever, it happens. The card just kills you the other, percentage of the time that there's a mismatch. Um, Tassiger is a really huge gain here. I mean, obviously the card's great, but like very specifically, these colors were looking for a card to play that role. And the blue cards definitely felt really surgical at what they did in the format. Like there's a large spectrum of decks that have been pretty recently, at least before the bannings, and like even before that, there's a lot of like these random. I don't know how to describe them other than like it's there's this sector of the metagame between playing fair and being combo that like reminds me of like the most the best way to describe this deck is just think of Legacy Lands and the role that it plays in that metagame. There's like a spectrum of those decks in Modern that have existed for a while. I guess Birthing Pod was also a big reason why this deck was never good before, was because you could never outgrind the Birthing Pod deck in a very long game without Sphinx's Revelation. Even that wasn't very good because it was just clunky. You had to actually kill them, and this deck doesn't do that very well. Without that card to face against, without Urza's Towers to play against, because that deck has kind of fallen off the map because Burn and Infect are so heavily played, and those are like two of the worst matchups. This deck has found like a nice little metagame niche, I think. I really like 4-drop Jace, for the record. It's like the same 4-drop doesn't die to like Abrupt Decay. Compulsive Research is great. Like again, every card in the deck was great except for the Ashiok. I might want another Knight of Souls Betrayal or a Curse of the Deathhold because that seems backbreaking against a lot of decks. Yeah, again, like this deck is a deck that you have to move off of if people move towards things that are inherently good against it. But I don't see that happening in the time being, and it's kind of interesting how previously it's felt like post Pro Tour the metagame has broadened. Like, I guess it kind of has here in the sense that Abzan's not 30%, but like it's just very narrow and set, and I think it's very hard to break into because some of the decks are just so aggressive. Like you have to beat Infect, Twin, Amulet. Like that's asking a lot, and I don't actually even think this deck can really beat Amulet, but that's a different story. There's just a lot of decks that you have to fight against that push you in a lot of cheap interactive ways that are at the top of the tier list right now, and you really just have to fight those decks, and you are basically locked into playing these cards, which the deck does, and it plays cards like this and this that break open the people who are trying to next level that, like Twin. This deck was shown dismantling Twin time and time again. And we're not quite there, and it's going to take a while. And I think this deck is going to be a good choice until people start pushing ahead of, like, going another level on top of it. And that's going to take people pushing the Infect decks out. That's going to take a lot of this deck, actually, to do. Because I think that people are attached to their Modern combo decks a lot. So anyways, the gist of it is, this deck was actually really good. I could see variants of it being played for quite a while. And just be aware that as things shift, you have to be really in tune with their shifts and be willing to dump this deck for something completely different. But of course, that's how Modern has basically always been, unless you were casting the card Birthing Pod.